When physics starts looking like science fiction, let's begin with the headline that should make every rational human pause for a second and go, wait. Scientists say they have measured negative time, not slower time, not time dilation like Einstein predicted, not weird clocks running slightly off. Negative time, in other words, an event that seems to happen before it happens. If that sounds like a rejected script from a Christopher Nolan movie, congratulations, your intuition is working perfectly. Because our everyday experience tells us something very simple about reality. Causes come before effects. You drop a glass, it shatters. You press a button, the light turns on. You don't walk into a room and see a shattered glass magically jump back into your hand before you drop it. But in a recent physics experiment, researchers studying quantum systems claim they observed something bizarre. A photon interacting with atoms in a carefully designed experiment appears to leave the system before the interaction should have finished. The measured duration is, mathematically speaking, less than zero. Now physicists will quickly jump in and say, relax. Nothing supernatural happened, but that's exactly where things get interesting. Because when scientists rush to reassure the public that something doesn't break the laws of physics, it often means one thing. It definitely looks like it does. Quick timestamp before we mess with causality. If you like videos that make your brain do that little wait, what? Move, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and tap the notification bell so you're alerted whenever a new deep dive drops. It's free, it takes a second. The YouTube algorithm basically runs on attention, and it's the best way to support the channel. Okay, back to the part where time starts acting suspicious. And when the thing apparently being broken is time itself, people naturally start asking questions. Questions like, if time can go negative in a laboratory experiment, could it go negative somewhere else? Could time run backward? And the biggest question of all, if scientists discovered something that allows time to be manipulated, would they actually tell us? Because history suggests something very inconvenient for the official narrative. When governments discover powerful technologies, they almost never announce them immediately. They hide them. The experiment that shouldn't be possible before we dive into the conspiracy rabbit hole. Let's understand what actually happened in the experiment. Physicists were studying how light interacts with a cloud of atoms. When a photon passes through the atoms become briefly excited and then relax again. That process should take a measurable amount of time. Simple enough. But when researchers analyzed the data using quantum mechanical models, something strange appeared in the results. The calculated interaction time wasn't just short, it was negative. In simple terms, the equations suggested the system finished responding before the photon interaction was supposed to complete. That sounds impossible, because if something ends before it begins, causality collapses. The entire structure of reality becomes a very confusing mess. Now physicists insist this doesn't mean time literally ran backward. They explain it as an interference effect, something related to the strange way quantum waves overlap. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Quantum mechanics has a long history of things that sound impossible until decades later when we build technologies based on them. Lasers were once theoretical curiosities. Quantum tunneling sounded absurd until we built scanning tunneling microscopes. Entanglement sounded like science fiction until it became the basis of quantum communication research. Belle, I want your take right here. When you hear negative time, do you interpret it as a math artifact of quantum interference, or as a hint that time itself isn't what we think it is? Drop your opinion in the comments. We really want to read what you think, especially thoughtful, constructive comments. We try to read as many as possible, and when we can, we reply or even use the best ideas as inspiration in future videos. So when physicists say, don't worry, this doesn't mean time travel, the public hears something slightly different. They hear, we don't fully understand what this means yet. And uncertainty is where speculation thrives. The forbidden question, can time run backward? Let's commit the crime scientists hate the most. Let's ask the obvious question. If time can appear negative in a quantum system, could time be reversed? Physics, inconveniently, does not completely forbid this idea. Many of the fundamental equations describing particles are time-symmetric. That means they work equally well if time runs forward or backward. Imagine filming a billiard ball collision and playing it in reverse. In many cases, the reversed video still obeys the laws of physics. The equations don't care about direction. The reason we experience time moving forward is something called entropy, the tendency for systems to move from order to disorder. Ice melts, glass shatters, eggs scramble. But entropy is a statistical law, not an absolute rule of reality. And that leaves a tiny, unsettling door open, a door where, under certain conditions, time could behave strangely. Now combine that idea with experiments measuring negative time intervals, and suddenly the conversation shifts from physics curiosity to something much more provocative. What if time isn't as fixed as we thought? What if it's flexible? And if it's flexible, the next question becomes unavoidable. Who gets to bend it? Let me ask you something honestly. If humans ever discovered even a tiny ability to manipulate time, do you think governments would immediately publish it or classify it? Drop your thoughts below. We really want to read your opinions, especially thoughtful comments, and we try to respond when we can or use the best ideas for future episodes. Governments love secrets. Let's step away from equations and look at history. Because history is the greatest fuel for conspiracy theories. During World War II, governments secretly developed nuclear weapons. The Manhattan Project involved over 130,000 people. For years, the public had absolutely no idea what was happening. Stealth aircraft existed for decades before they were publicly acknowledged. The internet began as a military network. GPS was originally a military tool. The pattern is obvious. When a technological breakthrough has strategic value, governments classify it. They hide it. They test it quietly. So imagine, just hypothetically, that a breakthrough in physics suggested even the tiniest possibility of manipulating time. Would that information be released immediately? Or would it vanish behind the thick steel doors of classified research programs? You already know the answer. Because the ability to influence time would not just be a scientific discovery. It would be the ultimate strategic weapon. The time weapon scenario, let's imagine a technology capable of manipulating time on a small scale. Even a tiny ability to influence temporal order could change everything. Think about intelligence operations. If an agency could observe events slightly before they happen, the strategic advantage would be enormous. Financial markets could be predicted. Military actions could be anticipated. Political events could be influenced. Now, go one step further. What if it became possible to send information into the past? Not people, not machines, just information. A message, a signal, that alone would rewrite the entire structure of geopolitics. Wars could be prevented or engineered. Stock markets could be controlled. Elections could be influenced. History itself could become editable. That sounds insane, but the moment physics experiments start suggesting that time can behave in unexpected ways, the imagination of both scientists and conspiracy theorists begins racing at full speed. The CIA and temporal research here is where speculation begins turning darker. Intelligence agencies have a long history of exploring unusual scientific ideas. In the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union funded research in psychic phenomena, remote viewing, and unconventional physics. The CIA funded the Stargate project, investigating whether the human mind could access distant locations. Some of those programs sound ridiculous today, but the fact that they existed proves one thing. Governments are willing to explore bizarre ideas if they believe a strategic advantage might exist. Now imagine a modern intelligence agency hearing about an experiment suggesting negative time intervals. Even if the result is misunderstood, even if the effect is small, would they ignore it? Of course not. They would fund research immediately, quietly, deep inside classified laboratories. Because if time manipulation were possible, even at the tiniest scale, the country that mastered it first would gain an advantage beyond anything history has ever seen. The great silence of physicists here is something curious about the scientific community. Physicists are extremely careful when discussing topics like time travel, almost painfully careful. Whenever the subject appears, explanations are filled with disclaimers. Not real time travel, not backward causality, not a violation of physics. But why such caution? Part of the reason is understandable. Scientists know how easily complex ideas become sensationalized. Yet sometimes the defensive tone creates the opposite effect. It makes the public suspicious. Because when experts insist that something is absolutely impossible, history occasionally proves them wrong. Airplanes were impossible once. Nuclear energy was impossible once. Quantum computers sounded impossible for decades. So when physicists say negative time doesn't mean time travel, the public wonders whether they are explaining reality or simply protecting a narrative. Manipulating the past means controlling the future. Here is the ultimate fear hidden inside all discussions about time. If the past can be influenced, even slightly, then the future becomes controllable. Imagine a system capable of sending a warning message backward by 1 hour. That alone could prevent accidents, predict disasters, alter decisions, but could also be abused. Markets could be manipulated with perfect foresight. Political outcomes could be engineered. Entire historical events could shift. One small nudge in the past could ripple forward through time like a stone thrown into a lake. The terrifying part is not the technology itself. The terrifying part is who controls it. Because if history teaches us anything, it is that power concentrates, and power rarely volunteers to limit itself. The psychology of time conspiracies lets pause and examine why the idea of time manipulation fascinates people so deeply. It's not just about physics, it's about control. Time is the one resource every human shares equally. No billionaire, no president, no military general has more than 24 hours in a day. Time is the ultimate equalizer. So the idea that someone might secretly control time triggers a very primal fear. It suggests that reality itself could be manipulated by hidden actors. It suggests history might not be as fixed as we think. It suggests the future might already be influenced by decisions we cannot see. Even if these fears are exaggerated, they reveal something powerful about human psychology. We are deeply uncomfortable with the idea that the universe might not behave the way our intuition expects. The real mystery, so where does this leave us? Scientists measured something that looks like negative time. Physicists say it doesn't mean time travel. Conspiracy theorists say it proves time manipulation is real. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Physics often produces results that look impossible at first glance, but eventually find explanations within existing theories. At the same time, history shows that technological breakthroughs are frequently explored in secret before becoming public knowledge. So the real question is not whether time travel has been proven. The real question is simpler. If humanity ever discovered a way to manipulate time, even slightly, even temporarily, will we be the last to know? Because if the past could be changed, even by a fraction of a second, the consequences would ripple across history. And if that power existed somewhere in a classified laboratory today, the world outside those walls might never notice. At least not until the timeline itself began to feel slightly different. If you want more stories where physics starts sounding like forbidden knowledge, do the quick free thing that helps the most. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. And if you know someone who loves time paradoxes and deep state hypotheticals, share this video with them. Because the next time the headlines say, "Don't worry," that's usually when the real questions begin.